Welcome to the treasure hole, where the treasure is having all the footage ready for the final part of the series, and the hole is procrastinating instead of editing it. In this third and final part of making cheap LARP weapons, I'm gonna show you how I painted and finished the axe. We're gonna start off with a few base layers. I mixed some black acrylic paint with some liquid latex to a 50-50 ratio. It's not an exact science, but I do make sure to mix it well. Then I took a medium-sized brush and started applying it to the axe. I made sure to spread out the paint very thinly and try to prevent it from pooling anywhere. I decided to switch to a sponge for the rest, but I needed to wash my brush first, or else the latex would dry and the brush would become useless. I cut a cheap cleaning sponge in half and decided to try something new. Instead of using it in a brushing motion, like I usually do, I tried dabbing the paint on. I've never used this technique before, but I'm hoping that this way my coats will be more even and there won't be any distinct brush strokes visible on the weapon. I was surprised to see how much coverage I got with just one layer. Usually I can still see the color of the foam poke through here and there, but not with this dabbing technique. Very nice. In order to hang it to dry, I used a bit of twisted wire. I wrapped one end around the handle and bent the other into a hook shape. Then I hung it to dry on my drying rack, off camera. Acrylic dries fast and latex even faster, but not when it pulls up in the nooks and crannies of the foam. So I take a small brush and wipe away any excess paint, before hanging it to dry for about 10 minutes. And after 2 minutes I whipped out my hairdryer because I am horribly impatient. Time for layer 2. This time I used one of my fancy sponge brushes that I got for Christmas last year, and used it on the whole weapon this time, since the dabbing technique worked so well. Then I waited for it to dry and repeated the process another 3 times. So that's 5 base layers of black in total. I hung the axe in the sunlight and allowed it to dry for half an hour before the next step. Okay, time for the metallic paint. I had some paint left from a previous project, which is a mix of 2 parts silver, 1 part black and 3 parts latex, roughly. It's more than a week old, so I added some more latex and a dash of water to dilute it a little. The sponge brush worked well, but the latex inside had dried out and made it unusable. So I sort of DIY'd my own sponge brushes by stripping the handle and sticking a cleaning sponge to the end with some hot glue. It worked like a charm. I applied an even layer of paint on the metal parts of the axe. I could have left the cuts and cracks unpainted, but I wanted to reinforce them with additional paint layers. I made a final check to see if I covered everything, and then I left it to dry. I blasted it with the hairdryer. I repeated this process until I had a total of 5 layers of paint on there. Then I moved on to the wooden shaft. So in the past, I found that my wood comes out too dark. In my last project, I mixed a brighter color together with brown, white and a little yellow. I tried the brush first, hoping it would result in a nice effect, but switched back to the sponge with the second layer because dabbing just works so well. But I still used a brush for those hard to reach places. After applying about 3 layers, the brightness of the wood was to my liking, but it's too uniform. I mixed some darker variants of the brown paint on a piece of cardboard and used it to dry brush. Dry brushing is a technique where you take a little bit of paint on your brush and then wipe away almost all of it before lightly brushing it on your piece, which can create very nice effects. Now I still need practice with this. I applied it too thickly at first and had to start over. The result wasn't exactly what I was hoping for, but it did the job. Okay, next up is weathering. This is a technique used by a lot of prop and cosplay designers where you intentionally dirty your object to make it look, as the name implies, weathered. It will give this axe some extra character. The easiest way to do this is by diluting some black or brown paint with water, smearing it all over the desired area and then wiping it off again, leaving some of it in the nooks and crannies. As with the dry brushing, I still need some practice with this. I diluted my paint too much, I didn't mix properly and I didn't really have a plan. And because the axe is made of soft foam, it's really easy to wipe off more than intended. Also, sometimes the paint pools and leaves runners as I hang it to dry, but I took extra care to prevent that this time. After some trial and error, I got pretty close to the desired effect. Next, I used a 50-50 mix of silver and latex to paint the axe's beveled edges. I was hoping to create a ground metal look by applying perpendicular brush strokes, but I didn't like how uneven the coverage was. In hindsight, I should have just kept going, but instead I switched to my trusty sponge again for the second layer. I discovered it's really easy to make a clean border by brushing it along the edge like this first. I applied about 5 layers of this, after which I made some small corrections. To make the metal parts really pop, I decided on some more dry brushing. But since I wasn't sure if I could pull it off, I practiced on a piece of scrap foam first. For this I used pure silver paint, as latex dries too quick and it's such a thin layer that it's not really a problem. I used a cheap rough brush with hard bristles, which works best for this. Using the side of the brush with downward strokes gave me exactly what I was looking for. Going over it again from the other side made it even better. Now this looks like a piece of metal that has seen some use, and as you can see, dry brushing can be used to completely transform a piece. Now I use the same technique on all the edges of the axe, starting with the pommel to get a hang of it. I was quite happy and relieved to see how well it worked, so I moved on to the axe head. I go over all the edges, trying not to get paints where I don't want it. When that does happen, it's usually easy to wipe off with a drop of water or some spit. Oh, that looks pretty good. But what if we, should I just... it could ruin the axe though. Fuck it, let's try it. I very lightly brushed the whole axe with a very, very small amount of paint. I remember regretting it when I was halfway, but I really liked the result. It gave the axe a really nice shine that I didn't know it was lacking. After all that silver, I took some of that black and silver mixture to redefine the cuts and scratches in the metal parts, using a very thin brush. With the paint job finished, it's time for the dreaded Isoflex to make its appearance. I opened up my front and back door and put on a respirator because this stuff is really nasty. It's as thin as water, so don't let it drip all over your floor and table like I did, despite the bucket. Actually, you probably want to do this outside if you can. I can't. My balcony is a glorified gutter with a fence. Anyway, it's hard to see where you've applied it as it's completely translucent, but it's very glossy, so I held it in the sunlight to see any spots I've missed. No need for multiple layers of this, one coat is enough. This stuff is very runny, so I make sure to put some paper towels down on the floor as it hangs to dry for at least 6 hours. Good evening. Time to pick which leather I want to use for the handle. I bought a kilo of leather scraps from a lady in a nearby town. She had a lot of colors and it's only cost me €5. An absolute steal. Anyway, I went with this dark brown leather. I cut a 25mm wide strip and did a few test wraps to see how tight I had to pull to make it to the other end of the handle. No, too short. Almost there, but still a bit short. Once I had the desired wrapping technique down, I measured and cut the strip at an angle to help with the wrapping. Then I applied some spray-on glue to the leather. In hindsight, I should have waited until after I applied the contact glue on both the leather and around the handle, but it worked out okay. I stuck the leather to the handle and then started wrapping it all the way to the bottom, making sure to have a constant bit of overlap with the leather below. At the end, I measured and cut the leather diagonally again and glued it to the end of the handle. It's very important to have this last bit stick really well, so I applied a little extra for good measure. And that's it, we're done. It came out way better than I expected. I really liked the new dabbing technique. Man, I made it through this whole video without making a dab joke. Anyway, all that's left now is just a quick spray of silicone and then it's ready to use. If you have any questions, I shouldn't do that because it's covered in silicone. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, share it with people that might like it. Oh no, it's fine. See you next time. Bye bye.